What do Dawkins, dogs, dirt, and dust have to do with ray comfort and the second law of thermodynamics? Vice Rhino and I will elucidate if you stick around. Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Currently, I'm trying to get to that 750 mark. Today, I have a very special guest co-host. Thank you, Vice Rhino, for helping me with this one, or actually two. It got pretty long and we had to break it into two parts.
This is actually part 2, so if you're looking for part 1, the link will be in the description as well as in a card in the corner of the video. So go ahead and give that a watch if you like, but also, this is Ray Comfort. He's all over the place. If you get here before seeing part 1, you're not missing any critical plot points. So without further ado, I give you Ray Comfort.
In 1 trillion years, all these rocks here will be turned to dust. We'll be turned to dust. The dog will be turned to dust. The flowers, the birds, the trees, even the mountains and the planets will be turned to dust. Everything is corrupting. Does that make sense?
I think it definitely makes sense.
Now he also has that this woman agrees with him, but why does he think this? I observe decay in dead organic things, but they don't become dust. I chose this article to help me explain the decomposition cycle to Ray, even though it's about composting. Composting is just a way to speed up the decay process, so it's the same thing that he's talking about. The article just tells you how to do it faster to make compost for your garden. I chose this one because the first sentence starts with something that I know Ray can understand. That banana peel in the waste bin will eventually naturally decompose, as will all organic waste, thanks to helpful microorganisms in the environment that feed on the decaying detritus. Microorganisms are vital to the composting process and are found everywhere in the environment. There are two main classes of composting microorganisms, known as anaerobes and aerobes. In addition to the microorganisms, other helpful creatures, such as pillbugs, centipedes, and worms, will find their way to the composting pile if the conditions are right. These animals break down the food waste, yard trimmings, and other organics in the compost pile and help turn the waste material into nutrient-rich soil. At the third stage, temperatures begin to drop enough for mesophilic microorganisms to resume control of the compost pile and finish breaking down the remaining organic matter into usable humus. That's this kind of humus, not the edible kind. Ray seems to be confusing nutrient-rich soil with dust. They aren't the same. Dust is made up primarily of dirt, but even dirt and soil aren't the same. Soil is composed of organic and inorganic matter. It may contain nutrients, minerals, microorganisms, water, decaying organic matter, earthworms, and other essential elements needed to sustain plant growth. Dirt is dead soil. It is void of any nutrients that a plant needs to grow. One sign that it is dirt and not soil is when you add water to it. Dirt, when added to water, will not compact well. It is not able to hold plants. That is why it is not good for planting. Things that break down become nutrient-rich soil, which feeds the plants and feeds the animals, which feed on other animals, which die and break down and again feed the plants. Everything isn't moving toward dust. The cycle just keeps going. It's been going on for how many years now, Rhino?
6,000 years, obviously.
Ray says we can see the world turning to dust everywhere. I haven't noticed the world turning to dust around me. If we really can see it everywhere, we should be able to find numerous articles about how the amount of dust on the planet is increasing. Yet, when I did several searches rewording my queries, I found only 2 articles that were even close to helpful. This one that says, dust is a key component of Earth's climate system. When it interacts with clouds, oceans, and the sun's radiation, it has an overall impact on our planet's living systems, affecting everything from weather and rainfall to global warming. There are 2 types of dust in the atmosphere, both kicked up by high-velocity winds in dry areas. Fine dust tends to cool because it scatters sunlight, much like clouds do. Coarse dust, which is larger in size and originates in places like the Sahara Desert, tends to warm the atmosphere, much like greenhouse gases. Knowing precisely how much coarse dust is in the atmosphere is essential for understanding not only the atmospheric phenomena that dust influences, but also the degree to which dust must be warming the planet. Now, UCLA scientists report that there is 4 times the amount of coarse dust in the Earth's atmosphere than is currently simulated by climate models. Their findings appear in the Journal of Science Advances. The researchers found that Earth's atmosphere contains 17 million metric tons of coarse dust. By plugging this amount of missing coarse dust into models, BI said it increases the likelihood that the net amount of dust overall, both fine and coarse, is warming rather than cooling the Earth's climate system from air to oceans. Coarse dust particles warm the Earth's entire climate system by absorbing both incoming radiation from the sun and outgoing radiation from the Earth's surface. These particles can impact stability and circulation within our atmosphere, which may affect atmospheric phenomena like hurricanes. BI worked with Jasper Koch, a UCLA associate professor of atmospheric and oceanic scientists, to determine the actual amount of coarse dust in the atmosphere by analyzing dozens of published aircraft-based observations, including recent measurements taken over the Sahara Desert, and comparing those with a half-dozen widely used global atmospheric model simulations. When we compared our results with what is predicted by current climate models, we found a drastic difference, Koch said. State-of-the-art climate models account for only 4 million metric tons, but our results showed more than 4 times that amount, according to BI and Koch. In addition, the 2 scientists found that coarse dust leaves the atmosphere less quickly than the current climate models predict. Air has a tendency to mix more turbulently when dust is present. In the case of the Sahara, air and dust mix in ways that push the dust upward, which can work against gravity and keep the dust in the air much longer, they said. The scientists' findings also show that because dust particles stay in the atmosphere longer, they are ultimately deposited further from their source than has been predicted by these models or explained by the current theory. Dust particles blown from the Sahara, for example, can travel thousands of miles in the atmosphere, reaching as far as the Caribbean and the United States. Due to the way coarse dust interacts with the sun's energy in clouds, it can also have a major impact on timing of precipitation, as well as how much or how little rain falls. Models have been an invaluable tool for scientists, but when they miss most of the coarse dust in the atmosphere, it underestimates the impact that this type of dust has on critical aspects of life on Earth, from precipitation to cloud cover to ocean ecosystems to global temperature. So the amount of dust on the planet has a significant effect on climate change. Scientists here say there is far more dust on Earth than they realize, but they have no information about how the dust got there. Has it always been there? Is there a gradual increasing in the amount of dust on the planet? Ray obviously says that there is. Ray, if you have any scientific data on this, please share it with the climate scientists. They just told you that this data is important. The second article I found was this one. It says, the Sahara Desert is the largest source of mineral dust in the world. Emissions of African dust increased sharply in the early 1970s, a change that has been attributed mainly to drought in the Sahara-Sahel region, caused by changes in global distribution of sea surface temperatures. The human contribution to land degradation and dust mobilization in this region remains poorly understood, owing to the paucity of data that would allow the identification of the long-term trends in desertification. Direct measurement of airborne African dust concentrations only became available in the mid-1960s from a station on Barbados II and subsequently from satellite imagery since the late 1970s. They do not cover the onset of commercial agriculture in the Sahel region 170 years ago. Here, we construct a 3,200-year record of dust deposition off northwest Africa by investigating the chemistry and grain size distribution of terrigenous sediments deposited at a marine site located directly under the West African dust plume. With the help of our dust record and of proxy record for West African precipitation, we find that, on the century scale, dust deposition is related to precipitation in tropical West Africa until the 17th century. At the beginning of the 19th century, a sharp increase in dust deposition parallels the advent of commercial agriculture in the Sahel region. Our findings suggest that human-induced dust emissions from the Sahel region have contributed to the atmospheric dust load for about 200 years. That's the entire article. There's nothing about how decay rates affect the amount of dust. Since these scientists are studying dust deposition, if everything in the world slowly turning to dust was part of the picture, you would think that they would at least mention it. So all Ray has for us is the world is turning to dust because I say so.
Ray is just a dusty old man.
Exactly.
The problem, Ray, is you have an insufficient understanding of the second law of thermodynamics. Here, let me help you with that. I found an article from the website Science Meet Religion by David H. Bailey, a Mormon with a PhD in mathematics from Stanford, who frequently discusses how science and religion are not mutually exclusive. So I didn't even take this from a secular source, but from a believer. He says, the second law of thermodynamics is an expression of the universal principle of entropy, namely that entropy of an isolated system that is not in equilibrium will tend to increase over time, approaching a maximum value. At a fundamental level, this is really a statement about probability, because it is equivalent to saying that any system will, with a very high probability, tend to a disordered state. The creationist's fallacy. A key condition of the second law is that the system being described is a closed system, in particular one that has no influx or outflow of energy. Unfortunately for creationists, this is where the application of the second law of thermodynamics to evolution breaks down. The Earth's biosphere is most definitely not a closed system. To the contrary, every day for several billion years, the Earth has received solar energy in the amount of 10,000 times the total daily energy consumption of the entire present-day human civilization. Indeed, biology can be seen as a process that extracts energy from the environment to create order and complexity. This was perhaps best expressed by physical chemist Ira Levine back in 1978. Increasing entropy means increasing disorder. Living organisms maintain a high degree of internal order. Hence, one might ask whether life processes violate the second law. The statement that entropy cannot decrease applies only to systems that are both closed and thermally isolated from their surroundings. Living organisms are open systems since they both take in and expel matter. Further, they exchange heat with their surroundings. The organism takes in foodstuffs that contain highly ordered, low-entropy polymeric molecules, such as proteins and starch, and excretes waste products that contain smaller, less ordered molecules. Thus, the entropy of the food intake is less than the entropy of the excretion products returned to the surroundings. The organism discards matter with a greater entropy content than the matter it takes in, thereby losing entropy to the environment to compensate for the entropy produced in the internal irreversible process. In short, the thermodynamics argument against evolution is completely groundless. That would seem to pretty much settle it. Think Ray will ever get the message that this argument has been thoroughly debunked? I have to admit, though, that I knew evolution didn't violate the second law of thermodynamics when I began this project, but I didn't know why or how. And since Ray hasn't been to school since high school, and he's 70, so that would mean he graduated in about 1968, think the old dog can learn a new trick?
No, I don't think that Ray is willing to learn. There's nothing he's said here that he hasn't been corrected on a million times before. You can watch videos of people explaining these concepts to him, and he completely ignores them and continues on with his same pretty much unchanged shtick. And while I appreciate you trying to keep it classy, let's rhino it up a little, shall we? Food has less entropy than shit. Animals turn food into shit. So animals increase the entropy of the planet. And it has been proposed that the development of life is actually predicted by the laws of thermodynamics. Life is more efficient at producing entropy than not life, so life develops as a faster, more efficient method for increasing the entropy of the universe, or turning food into shit.
Could man have evolved from pigs? Because if they ever give you a skin graft, they may use pig skin. Did you know that?
No, being able to accept a skin graft from a genetically modified pig does not mean that humans evolved from pigs. It just means that their skin is similar enough to ours that it can work with fairly minor gene edits. And it's not like it's currently the norm to use pig skin for skin grafts. The genetically modified pigs were developed in the 90s, but it wasn't until 2019 that they first used a live cell skin graft from these pigs. And even then, it was a temporary skin graft that was removed after 5 days and replaced by a skin graft from the patient's own thigh. And while it does not mean we evolved from pigs, it does heavily imply that we share a common ancestor with pigs. We are related closely enough for this to work with only minor changes.
The problem is that evolution is as big as the human imagination. Someone who embraces it can believe anything he wants as long as he qualifies it with the word probably.
Probably. I have no idea.
It's probably like
It probably was by accident.
Okay, that's nice, a supercut of all the probablys. But do you know what happens when you ask college kids who likely aren't specializing in evolutionary biology a bunch of questions about evolutionary biology? You get kids who don't know what they're talking about but don't want to sound like they don't know what they're talking about, so instead of saying, "I don't know," they guess. And then they hedge their guesses with the word probably to indicate that they are guessing and to save face should they turn out to be wrong. But Ray, if you actually want answers to your questions, maybe consider asking evolutionary biologists instead of college kids. Being able to trick random people into giving bad answers to questions they don't fully comprehend is not evidence that evolution is false. In fact, Canadian comedian Rick Mercer had a segment on his show called Talking to Americans, in which he would travel to different parts of the US and get Americans on camera saying stupid things, like that they think the US should bomb Saskatchewan or congratulate Canada on finally having 800 miles of paved road.
Do you think that America should be bombing Saskatchewan?
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Yeah.
What about ground forces? Do you think ground forces should be sent into Saskatchewan? That might be safer?
That's what they're going to have to do. That's what they're going to have to do.
So bomb Saskatchewan?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Congratulations, Canada. 800 miles of paved road.
I guarantee there is a lot of footage of that show with people who did not give stupid answers that just got left on the cutting room floor. Point is, man-on-the-street style interviews make it ridiculously easy to make people look bad.
I hope these young puppies can learn a new trick or two as well. Most of them are on the right track. They just don't have the entire picture yet. And I've mixed my metaphors, haven't I? I'm wondering how many students he had to interview to get the responses that he wanted. The real reason I cut in here is Ray has done something interesting, and it's very subtle. I had to listen to it 5 times to pick up exactly where it happens, and it's right here.
Gospel that the lost need to hear, because it's the gospel that's the power of God to salvation.
The music changes. Whoever did his audio mix did a great job because it's hard to find where the change occurs, but the tone of the music is definitely different between when he was talking to unbelievers earlier and when he now starts talking about his message. The music is warmer, more inviting, affirming.
Yeah, it goes from a piano circus type music to the kind of mellow piano music you'd have during an altar call in church, and they really did a good job on the transition. It's very subtle emotional manipulation.
You don't believe man and primates have a common ancestor?
I think we come from something deeper than that, you know?
Then God created us.
God created us, definitely, you know? We come from the root of Adam and Eve, you know?
Are you a Christian?
No.
Whoa! I didn't see that coming. He believes in Adam and Eve, but he isn't a Christian. He's likely a Muslim or Jewish, but I doubt Ray typically finds people who affirm his creation story, but not his gospel.
Every building is proof of a builder. You know a builder existed because there's a building. Every painting is proof of a painter. No paintings painted themselves. Is that right? That is true. So the painting is absolute scientific proof there was a painter, and the building is absolute scientific proof there was a builder, because buildings don't build themselves and paintings don't paint themselves.
The existence of a painting or building is scientific proof of a painter or a builder. So now things are science. How can the existence of an object be scientific proof of anything? Rhino, I think I need to frown again. If the existence of an object is scientific proof of anything, then science has been around far longer than man. If observing an object is obtaining scientific proof about the object, then is a bird looking at me conducting a scientific experiment? Am I currently obtaining scientific proof about the origins of all the objects in this room because I'm looking at them? Sheesh.
What Ray is missing here is that buildings and painters are not themselves proof of the building or painter. The only reason we know that buildings are made by builders and paintings are made by painters is because we have experience with them. This is just the watchmaker argument with a mask on, and it's not very convincing.
And creation is absolute proof of the Creator. You can see the genius of God's creative hand in flowers and birds and trees and puppies and kittens and donkeys and horses and camels. All these things that surround us, man can't make. We can't begin to make an eye.
Ray, you need to update your research. Scientists say that they've cracked the neural code in a mouse's retina to create a device that restores near normal sight in blind mice. They've also claimed to decipher the same code in a monkey's retina, boosting hopes for a major bionic breakthrough, an artificial human eye that can see. This was in 2012, and this article is from just 3 months ago. It says, this device, which mimics the human eye structure, is sensitive to light and has a faster reaction time than a real eyeball. So yes, man has made an eye that can see. It's only a matter of time before prosthetic eyes that see will become widely available. I wonder what Ray will say if he actually saw this.
And that's ignoring the fact that we've been making camera sensors that are superior to our eyes for a while now. They don't have wires crossing in between the lens and the sensor that post-processing has to remove. They don't have only one tiny spot in the middle that can be in focus. They don't have everything outside of the center of the image in black and white with the camera software guessing at what the colors should actually be, thereby giving the illusion of having taken a color photograph when in reality only the middle has a true representation of the colors. The breakthroughs that you're pointing out are just in getting sensors like this to communicate with our brains. But let's just pretend that what Ray said here is actually correct. Humans can't make this stuff. So what? Are we really arrogant enough to think that humans have, at this point in history, been able to figure out everything that is possible? No, we don't have sustained fusion reactors, yet the sun has been managing to do that for about 4.6 billion years, and will continue for about another 5 billion years. Does the fact that humans have not been able to build sustained fusion reactors mean that the existence of the sun is impossible? No, it does not. Birds were able to fly long before humans developed powered flight. Does that mean that bird flight was impossible before the 20th century? No, it does not. What humans can or cannot do has no impact on whether or not something is possible in nature.
The eye is so complex, so how could it happen from a random explosion in space?
Wait a minute. Earlier in the video, you played Dawkins telling you how the eye evolved. You cut out some of the key parts, but you had to at least watch it to include the clips that you did. You clearly know that no one thinks that eyes evolved from a random explosion in space. Ugh, he earns another frown.
You know, the Bible says God made man male and female, with eyes, ears, nose, mouth, heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, all these things, and the ability to reproduce after their own kind. And so we can see in creation exactly what the Bible says.
The Bible says almost none of that. It doesn't mention God making eyes and ears and kidneys and whatnot. It does say to be fruitful and multiply, but I don't think that it applies the word kind to humankind, which could be an interesting omission. But even if it did, that doesn't mean the Bible is true. Describing people as having been created mostly how we appear to exist now does not prove that they couldn't have evolved. It just shows that the people who wrote down the creation stories didn't know about evolution and didn't understand the concept of humans looking any different than they do now.
Well, there's different types of evolution. There's what's called speciation and adaptation. Adaptation is when birds' beaks change, and there's speciation, There's varieties between dogs. There's the Chihuahua and the Great Dane. That's not Darwinian evolution. Darwinian evolution says that we have a common ancestor with primates.
Adaptation of bird beaks isn't Darwinian evolution? And just who do you think did the experiments in the Galapagos region that led to the understanding of changing in bird beaks? And who did all those drawings we see of the beak changes? Darwin. If this isn't Darwinian evolution, even though it's the basis of his research, why?
Silly Granny. It's because Darwinian evolution only applies to evolution between kinds. Unless you can find a crocoduck, nothing will count as evolution for Ray. But then I've heard him talk about the platypus as supposedly being proof against evolution in other videos, and since the platypus is basically the closest we're going to get to anything like a crocoduck, it seems that the goalposts are subject to shifting.
Which I don't believe. You know why I don't believe it?
Why?
Because Jesus didn't believe it.
Ray doesn't believe in evolution because Jesus didn't believe in evolution. Newsflash, Ray. Jesus died before Darwin was born. Jesus didn't believe in Einstein either, or Copernicus, or Madame Curie, or Galileo. So should we throw out all of their discoveries too because Jesus didn't believe in them? Hell, we need to throw out everything we've discovered since the 1st century because Jesus didn't believe in it. Ray needs to give us his car back. Get the man a horse. Actually, Jesus never had a horse. Need to get him a donkey.
Jesus said, in the beginning, God created them male and female. He didn't make them primates. He made them male and female.
God didn't make Adam and Eve as primates because he made them male and female? So primates don't have males and females in their species? So just how do you think primates reproduce, Ray? Asexually? Does he think that humans are the only species that have sex? And why does he think that humans aren't primates? Carl Linnaeus classified them there in the 18th century. If you know why this has changed, Ray, please tell us.
You scoff, but I was at the zoo once and I saw a gorilla just split itself into 2 smaller gorillas right there before my eyes.
Afraid of death?
No, I'm okay with it now, but
No one's okay with that.
Shut the fuck up, Ray. There are plenty of people who have come to terms with their mortality, and I imagine that they would not appreciate your callous response to someone telling you that they aren't afraid of death. And as a Christian, shouldn't you be excited for death? You get to go from this painful earthly existence to eternal paradise. You should be excited.
You know what death is called?
Death?
He's got you there, Ray. Death is called death.
The Grim Reaper.
That is certainly one of the names for the mythological personification of death, yes. Why does that matter?
What's the difference between man and animals, do you know? The difference is that we believe in justice. That's one of the big differences. We set up court systems. We try murderers and rapists for doing wrong. Animals don't do that. They have no sense of righteousness.
Actually, they do, Ray. Some animals do have a sense of justice. Animals do punish their young for misbehaving. They ostracize members of the community for violating rules of the community. The most common example is pack animals challenging the leader for leadership. Not challenging is the norm, the rule, as it were. The challenger breaks the rule. If the challenger wins, he becomes the leader, and the old leader is banished or killed. If the challenger loses, he is banished or killed. So yes, Ray, animals do have justice systems.
Very rudimentary ones to be sure, but animals definitely do seem to have a moral sense. And as a surprise to no one who knows anything about evolution, the more social species have the most developed moral systems.
And that's because you and I are created in God's image with a sense of right and wrong and a conscience.
I thought God created Adam and Eve with no knowledge of good and evil, that came later after they ate the fruit. So if they didn't know good and evil, they must not have had a conscience, as it couldn't tell them anything. So with no conscience, how did they know it was wrong to eat the fruit? Also, where did the conscience come from if they weren't created with it? Was it a curse from the fall? If having a conscience is a curse, it can't be from God if it's the result of sin. This is getting confusing.
Well, you see, the knowledge of right and wrong is the conscience, and the fruit came from God, so the conscience comes from God. But he didn't want us to have it. We botched his plan when we acquired it. If only someone could have not created talking snakes.
How many lies have you told in your life?
I actually would like to get the opportunity to talk to Ray directly, as I would love to confront him on his questions. The answer to this question is similar to an answer in the movie My Cousin Vinny.
What would the correct ignition timing be on a 1955 Bel Air Chevrolet with a 327 cubic inch engine and a 4-barrel carburetor?
It's a bullshit question.
Does that mean that you can't answer it?
It's a bullshit question. It's impossible to answer.
Can you answer the question?
No, it is a trick question.
Why is it a trick question?
Because Chevy didn't make a 327 in 55. The 327 didn't come out till 62. And it wasn't offered in the Bel Air with a 4-barrel carb till 64. However, in 1964, the correct ignition timing would be 4 degrees before top dead center.
No person can honestly answer this question. No one can possibly remember everything they have ever said and know whether or not each statement was true or false, and whether or not they knew it was true or untrue. If it was untrue but they didn't know it at the time, it wouldn't be a lie. So it's not possible for anyone to know how many lies they've told, unless they're too young to talk, in which case they have never told a lie, but they're also incapable of answering the question, leaving you again at that no person can answer this question.
And it's also worth mentioning that learning how to lie is an important part of a child's development. It shows their growing understanding of the fact that beliefs are subjective and do not necessarily match with reality, and that what you can say can have an impact on these subjective beliefs. If nobody watched me get ready in the morning, then I can make them believe that I have brushed my teeth just by telling them that I did, even if I didn't. And I'm totally not using that as an example because of my kid who hates brushing his teeth. So basically, lying is how a child experiments with the concept of different people having experiences that are different from their own, and this is why young children are so bad at lying, while older children tend to get more savvy.
Have you been looking at pornography?
Pornography?
When someone repeats a question, they're biding time to try and think of a lie. Have you been looking at pornography?
This guy should have walked away at this point. Now Ray is just being insulting. He accuses the guy of thinking up a lie. More likely, the guy is just going through his memory for anything he might have looked at that could be considered pornography. Or he might be thinking, how long constitutes looking at it? I used to work as a cashier in a store, and there was pornography in the magazine section. I did see it when I rang it up for people. Does that constitute looking at it? Or I did see stuff on Twitter that's pornographic. Did I look at it because I saw it? These are likely the kinds of things he's asking himself. It's also part of why I'd like to go through Ray's script with him. As an ace person, porn does nothing for me. And no, I've never lusted because I don't feel sexually attracted to anything. I think he'd be blown away by that answer. I doubt he's ever encountered an ace before. He would probably think that I was lying.
Yeah, maybe he should have walked away, but I feel like Ray would have loved to have a clip of someone angrily storming off after he accused them of lying. What I want to see is someone pushing Ray on exactly why pornography is wrong. Yeah, Jesus said lusting is the same as fornication, sure, but why is fornication wrong? Because the Bible said so? Didn't Ray earlier say that people have a built-in conscience given to them by God? How does that work when so many people don't consider extramarital sex to be wrong?
Had sex before marriage?
Yes, I have.
So, Katie, I'm not judging you, and I appreciate your honesty, but you've just told me you're a lying thief and a fornicator.
Calling her a lying thief and a fornicator isn't judging her? How so? Because you claim she said it first. She admitted to doing some things that you consider sin, but she doesn't. So telling her these are wrong is most definitely judging her. And what does the Bible say about judging people, Ray? That's another sin on you. And saying you aren't judging her is a lie. Another sin on you, Ray. I sure hope you're ready to repent of making this video.
I mean, to be fair, Ray will at least admit that he is a lying, thieving, blasphemous adulterer, or whatever he's calling them. That's part of his shtick. Admit you're dirty, and Jesus will wash you clean. But step 1 is being shamed into thinking you've done something wrong when you haven't, or whatever you have done wrong is deserving of eternal torture as a punishment.
You know, the Bible says, hang on, the Bible says we drink iniquity like water. We love the darkness, we hate the light. That's the problem. You love sin. And the wages of sin is death. You don't want it to take you to hell. Where's your conscience? Blaspheming in the name of the God that gave you life? Fornicating when you know it's wrong? Looking at pornography? Your conscience should be doing its duty. It's God-given. It's like a smoke detector. And you've taken the batteries out of the smoke detector. It's meant to alarm you.
What about yours, Ray? Is your conscience telling you that you are sinning as you lie and judge people?
So this is deadly serious. If you were to die today, God would justly damn you, and we don't want that to happen.
Now, why do you say God would justly damn you? What in heaven's name is just about burning someone for eternity for telling a lie? Why do you think your God is just, or even that your God is real? I thought this was a video on the #1 reason that evolution is impossible. What on earth does any of this have to do with evolution?
Evolution is a non-issue. It doesn't matter. Just put it aside.
Say that again?
Evolution is a non-issue. It doesn't matter. Just put it aside.
Vice Rhino, why are we here? If evolution doesn't matter, why is he making a video about evolution? And why is Ray Comfort in the Evolution Exposed conference? Paul Agia is debunking that one, and he's up to episode 3. If you haven't seen those, they are excellent. I get that Ray doesn't understand evolution, so it makes sense that he would dismiss it as unimportant. But if it's so meaningless, why does he keep talking about it?
Probably because of the usual creationist false dichotomy. The choice must be between creation as described by the Bible or evolution. No other options are even thinkable. So in Ray's mind, if he can get people to have even the smallest doubts about evolution, then that automatically means that they'll come to the conclusion that Christian creationism is true.
And if you want to be a Christian and believe in evolution, it won't last very long. You'll realize it's baseless. It's unscientific.
When he says it's baseless and unscientific, is he talking about evolution or the gospel?
You're going to die. Everything dies. Everything winds down. So entropy, the scientific principle of the second law of thermodynamics, flies in the face of evolution. Things don't get better. They don't improve. They don't evolve. They get worse. And you'll see it happen in the mirror as you get older.
I have quite a few wrinkles. I know I look fairly young for my age. I'm 59, if you're wondering. And the deterioration inside my body is greater than what you can see externally. But this isn't evolution. It's aging. Living things age and die. This is the life cycle. It has nothing to do with evolution. If it did, you would have to say that evolution causes children to grow, and you can see evolution improving and expanding the child as he grows. But no, that's not evolution, nor is aging.
In fact, I would go so far as to say that evolution wouldn't be expected to extend life expectancies. As far as evolution is concerned, your health is only a priority up until you can reproduce. After that, there is some selection pressure to keep older generations around if they help care for the children's children, but not much.
God says your crimes against his law are so serious, he's given you the death sentence. You're on death row waiting to die.
All living things die. If God created us, he created us with a death sentence. I wonder if Ray believes in original sin or the age of accountability. If original sin, the unborn are condemned before birth. Sins committed by the sinner are irrelevant as the death sentence was there first.
So does it concern you that if you died today and death seized upon you, the Grim Reaper took you today, that you'd end up in hell?
Yeah.
Nope, there is no hell. Rhino?
Yeah, I have no concern for that myself personally. I've had a relatively easy time getting away from the fear of hell. However, I know that there are a lot of people who are brought up with this fire and brimstone threat of hell who continue to have a fear of it long after they stop believing in it. Getting people to really believe that hell is a real place is almost a form of psychological torture. When I was a believer, I was legitimately worried that I'd have to spend eternity without some of the people that I loved the most because they aren't believers. This is not the kind of burden that should be placed on a child's shoulders.
If I really, really believed in that, yeah, I would be concerned, but I don't.
This is good. I wonder if it will knock Ray off his script at all, that this guy doesn't believe that there is a hell.
My guess would be no, since Ray kept the clip in his video.
I really see that humans are very, what do you call it, this inherently bad, but we can't get good. So
you're agreeing with the Bible. It says humans are inherently bad. We've inherited a sinful nature.
So Ray says the sinful nature is inherited. It doesn't matter what you do. You were already condemned before you were born. So why would a loving God condemn us to an eternity in hell for being born the way he made us? This makes no... Rhino, I think you have the better vocabulary for describing what this says about the God of the Bible.
It demonstrates God to be a petty, vindictive thug who likes to torture children by giving some of them a short, painful life before he then condemns them to a pit of eternal fire after their early death. Is that what you're looking for?
But I'm deeply concerned. Look, you're going to die. We agree on that. You've sinned. We know that to be true. You know sin is wrong.
Objection! Assumes facts not in evidence. The guy admitted to doing some stuff, but at no point was it ever established that this is sin, or what sin is, or if sin even exists.
Because you've got a conscience. After death, the judgment. And if God brings out those secret sins, those sexual imaginations.
Now, the imagination is sinful too, but only when thinking about sex. Ray, your God seems rather obsessed with sex. Maybe it's God that has the problem, not man.
Yeah, and you know what? I kind of feel like Ray should be banned from college campuses. He's a creepy old man who likes to accost the students and ask them about their sex lives. Could you imagine the trouble that a professor would be in if he recorded conversations of himself asking everyone in his class about their porn use habits and sex lives, and then posting the clips to YouTube? I'm kind of surprised that Ray has been getting away with it as long as he has.
You know, entropy, or the second law of thermodynamics, is all around us, and the Bible actually speaks of it in Romans chapter 8, written 2,000 years ago. It speaks of the law of sin and death. The soul that sins shall die. It says the whole of creation is subject to corruption. That means it's crumbling. It's dying, the whole of creation. Everything.
He couldn't do it, Rhino. He couldn't make it to the end without showing that he doesn't understand the second law of thermodynamics. It doesn't say that everything is crumbling and dying.
Sal, you've been such a good sport listening to me, and I know you didn't agree with quite a lot of it, but you've been very gracious. Do you still believe in evolution?
Yeah.
You haven't believed anything I've said because I haven't backed it up with any actual evidence or scholarly article. I've just been telling you what I think, and oh, you aren't convinced by my opinions?
What do you think about what we talked about?
If any of it's true, I'll deal with it when I die.
Yeah, well, you don't want to do that because that means you'll end up in hell. It's too late. Your fate will be sealed, so deal with it before you die.
I'd like to see you back up that claim. Christians say you have to decide before you die, but there actually are no verses in the Bible that say that. They use Hebrews 9:27, as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. But the verse doesn't say there is no opportunity to decide after you die. It doesn't say how much, if any, time passes between death and judgment. They just add this so that they can claim that you need to do what they say, now. It worked on me at 16. But there really isn't any reason to believe that this is the way to read this.
It's the classic, believe what I say, or you'll regret it after you're dead, and no longer have any method of communicating that regret to anyone. If you can't convince them while they're alive, then they know that you're right after they're dead. It gives people like Ray an air of smugness to them.
And when we look back on how we became Christians, we see God's hand come upon us and prepare our hearts and soften us and open us. In fact, the Bible says you cannot come to Christ unless God draws you to himself.
Whoa! Wait! Ray Comfort is a Calvinist? Why is he even bothering to tell these people the gospel? If no one can believe unless they're drawn to God, then no one has a choice about belief. If they're drawn, they will believe. And if they aren't, they won't. But then again, when I was a Calvinist, I still told people the gospel just like Ray. Because you never know who God is going to draw. But the flaws in the Calvinist theology, ugh. God created the vast majority of people on earth for the purpose of watching them sin on earth and then casting them into hell to show you my glory. Aren't I just? But I will save a few of them.
Am I not merciful?
There, am I not loving? Why is the lack of love in this theology so hard to see? I can't blame him. It took me 42 years to figure it out myself. The rest of the video is just Ray explaining the gospel again and peddling his merch. I think we've learned that despite making a video on the second law of thermodynamics and evolution, Ray doesn't understand either of these. The world isn't turning to dust or dirt, and Ray enjoys asking college students questions they can't answer and then telling them what he thinks are the answers, even though he doesn't understand the science, and then claims that this proves his theology. Thank you so much for joining me, Vice Rhino. I loved having the opportunity to work with one of my favorite content creators.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Until next time, live your life.